So I want to talk about a topic that bothers me every single time I drive. It's the HOV lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes, that started coming around, the 90s? Late 90s maybe? I don't know. But they've been added more and more different freeways, and they really irritate me because they don't do what they're intended to do. They added them in there in order to encourage people to carpool, and then later they added special stickers to cars the state deemed worthy of driving in those lanes, such as hybrids and electric cars that produce less or no carbon emissions at the tailpipe. So these lanes are designed to decrease traffic and decrease emissions, but they do just the opposite. You see, these lanes aren't very highly used when they're under the restricted mode, because as most people know, you can use them, anybody can use them during a large portion of the day, but during the peak commute times when traffic is the heaviest, they are restricted to only be used by those particular cars. So when there are more cars on the road and those lanes are in most need to be used by everybody, they cannot be used by everybody. So what ends up happening is the only people that are using them are cars that just happen to have 2 or more people in them. Most of them are not carpooling. They just happen to have 2 people in the car or more people in the car for whatever reason. They didn't plan on carpooling, but they realize, oh, hey, we got 2 people in the car and it's during carpool hours. And, they look at their watch there. Let's drive in the carpool lane. So there wasn't actually any planned reduction of cars on the road because of those lanes and because of the socially engineered behavior the state was trying to do. It was just a coincidence. And then you have the electric and the hybrids. Now, these cars are supposed to put out less emissions, and that's debatable. They do produce less emissions at the tailpipe, obviously, because the electric cars don't even have a tailpipe, but in their manufacturing processes or in the way that they're charged up when you plug them in, they might save some emissions overall, but some say they actually produce more. That's debatable. Let's just take all that stuff out of it. Let's just say they only produce the emissions that come out of the car itself. And so they produce much less, right? Well, in that case, there's not that many running on the road. And you look on the carpool lane, you see a few Teslas and some Priuses and Nissan Leafs or Chevy Volts or any of those running down those HOV lanes, but not that many. And I live in a very highly saturated, relatively to probably the rest of the country, area of the nation that has a lot more of those cars than the rest of the United States of America, because out here in California, this close to Silicon Valley, there's a lot of hybrids and there's a lot of Teslas and things like that, but there's still not that many of them compared to the rest of the vehicular population. So the overall reduction in emissions because of people that actually bought those cars so they could use those lanes, I don't think is that many. And considering that the whole of traffic, all of the rest of the traffic is going slower and producing more emissions from these engines that do produce more emissions in general, because they're sitting there idling in traffic and just going slower and stopping and going, and acceleration produces a ton of emissions. That's where most of it comes from, actually, is when you actually have to accelerate and hit the pedal more, not just cruising down the road. So that's when most of the emissions are produced. So overall, it's done just the opposite effect, where it's increased congestion and increased emissions, and makes it also just a pain in the ass for everybody else. So I really think we need to abolish HOV lanes, get rid of them all, and just let people drive, because people are actually pretty good at doing what they're supposed to do in traffic anyway. Not because of laws, laws aren't actually what makes people do what they do. It's because people have a general interest in their own safety. Let's take traffic lights, for example. If you have traffic lights, why do people stop at red lights? Is it because it's illegal? Not usually, because unless there's a camera or a cop nearby, you're not going to get a ticket. And that's most of the intersections out there. Not all, barely any of them have red light cameras, and there's going to be a cop at one maybe once in a blue moon if you're going to decide to run a red light. So overall, besides maybe some initial embarrassment of people giving you the stink eye because you're running a red light, you could get away with it. But why do people not do that? Why do people not run red lights? It's because they know it'll cause an accident, and they don't want to get involved in an accident and cause injury to themselves and to others and be responsible for personal and property damage. So that's why people don't run red lights. What about speed limits? Why do we have speed limits? There's a street nearby my house. It's 3 lanes wide each direction. It's a boulevard. So there's a large center island with trees and shrubbery. There's no houses that face the street. There's no houses on the street. There's no businesses on the street. The houses, it's in a residential area, but the houses are behind sound walls. It's a main boulevard through a residential area. So there's just these huge areas on the side that are landscaped and have pathways for pedestrians and whoever else that are going to be out there. There's grass and it's straight. So people drive 60, 65 miles an hour on this street, and the cops are always out there trying to bust people and give them tickets because the speed limits are 45 on that street. Now, that street lends itself to higher speed limits, and people drive those higher speed limits because they can safely drive those speed limits and still not cause any danger to themselves or others around them. People are good at judging that generally. If people are going to drive recklessly, they're going to do it in spite of the law. There's not going to be any law that's going to keep somebody from doing that because there's laws out there now. People break them right now. So the laws aren't doing anything except for generating revenue for these police officers that just sit there and tag people and basically take your money for driving what the natural speed limit is on these streets. So it's, in my opinion, we should also abolish speed limits. There's no reason to have speed limits. All they do is cause people, maybe suggested limits, like, hey, this corner is a sharp corner coming up and you should probably only drive this fast. That's fine. It's a suggestion. And people can take that and be like, especially if it's an unfamiliar area, be like, hey, this is a dangerous area to drive that fast. I should probably drive this fast. But if they've driven it before and they know how fast they can go safely, then let them do it, because until they actually create a victim by hitting somebody or causing an accident and damaging people or property, there's no crime that's committed. And people say, well, yes, there is. They broke the speed limit. Well, that's a crime on the books, a legal crime, but there's no actual crime of natural law that's happened. And we can go all into unjust laws and that sort of thing. But it's of my opinion, and many others like me, that there is no crime unless there's a victim. And any traffic law is of such. Like, look at me, I'm wearing my seatbelt. Now, seatbelt laws are something that's been around for most of my driving life, but not all. And I was wearing my seatbelt way before seatbelt laws came into effect, and you could actually get a ticket for one. Why did I do that? Well, because I chose to, because I felt like, hey, they're going to protect me, and it started to become habit. Now I feel naked if I don't wear a seatbelt. But if I choose to not wear a seatbelt because I'm only going to go a couple hundred feet down the road, and I just feel like that's a risk I'm willing to take, then I should have the right to not wear a seatbelt. But unfortunately, I would get a ticket if there's a cop nearby and he sees me and he chooses to give me a ticket because he's trying to protect me from myself and my bad decisions. But I also have the car to remind me. I think it's probably through federal regulation that cars have to remind you when your seatbelt isn't put on. So now I got a car that this BMW, right? It's a pretty nice car. It's a 2011 BMW 328i. I bought it used with 32,000 miles on it. It's got 122,000 miles on it now. I've been driving it for a while. It's generally a pretty good car, but it's got this crappy system on it that has to remind me that I'm not wearing my seatbelt, and it annoys me with this terrible gong noise until I put it on, and that gong noise will last several minutes, and it does it for the passenger seat as well. Now, in order to detect if there is a passenger in the seat, it has a weight sensor of some sort that's built into the seat, and the weight sensor that BMW engineered here is pretty bad. I'm sorry, BMW, but you did a crappy job on it. They probably didn't want to put it in there, but it's probably required by federal law, and sometimes it goes off when there's nothing in the chair, when there's a coat in the chair. Sometimes it's gone off with a piece of paper in the chair, in the passenger seat. But like I said, it's gone off with nothing in the passenger seat as well. So there is that. And so I have this terribly designed system that's probably regulated by the federal government and I probably had to pay extra for it. Well, I did pay extra for it because BMW had to put that system into place. They had to design it. They had to use the parts for it. And obviously they're going to lump that into the cost of the car. So I did pay for it through the cost of the car. Same with like your TPMS sensors, right? The tire pressure monitoring system. Now this car has run flat tires, so it might be a good idea to have some sort of sensor system on it so that you know if your car has a flat tire, because you're not going to feel it because the car has run flat tires. Not many people can feel the difference when a run flat goes flat versus, you know, if you had a car that didn't have run flat tires. But all cars are required to have these TPMS systems now, and the systems aren't very good. The batteries run out after about, well, they say 7 to 10 years, but it's more like 3 to 5, it seems like, with most of these sensors. And they break all the time when people try to change tires, and they're just generally a big pain in the ass. So a lot of people don't even fix them because they don't really care about the system. They know it was there as a federal requirement. Oh, no, that's a gas. I thought that was my tire, because my tire light comes on. That one's the gas light, but my tire light comes on all the time because I think a battery's running out in one of my sensors, one or more of my sensors. So I have to pay a couple $100 per tire to get those sensors replaced. And that's a big chunk out of my pocket, out of a system I didn't really want. You know, I actually put non-run flat tires on my car because I don't like the way run flats ride. And no, my car doesn't have a spare, but you know what? I have a AAA card, and if it gets a flat and I really need it, I'll just get it towed to the local tire shop. That's a choice I decide to make as a consumer. However, I wasn't able to buy a car that has no TPMS system. In fact, shops can get in big trouble for disabling a TPMS system, even at the customer's discretion and request. There's legal issues about that. So, oh look, there's a cop over there, CHP at the gas station, and I don't know if you can see that over there. And I got to worry about that because he might give me a ticket for using my phone while I'm driving. And however, he'll probably be punching things into his laptop as he drives. But oh, it's required by his job. And you know, I'm not allowed to do it because I'm just a peon. I'm just a peasant, and he's one of the enforcers of the state. So he's allowed to get away with things I can't get away with. So anyways, that's a separate topic. So yeah, we have all these things that are regulated by government, and they tell us what to do. And they have a very little effect, or sometimes negative effect, and sometimes opposite effect of what they're intended to do. And it just goes to show you how bad government is. It is very inept. It doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't know how to do what it wants to do. It's just terrible. All it does is waste all our money to do things that we didn't want to do originally, or that maybe that some people wanted to do but other people didn't, but they end up having to pay for it. Also, it's a terrible, unethical system, and it needs to be abolished. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.